Oh, sweet. Come on.
Yeah, I'm waiting to.
There it is. And we are live. Welcome everybody to the Paranormal Graveyard with your host Roger Belt and my lovely partner over there, Christine Cruzetti.
Hello, everybody.
And we are going to be talking about haunted jails. I know that's got to be on everybody's A list, right? It is on mine, anyway.
Yeah.
But Christina's going to take us off, as she usually does, into the world of haunted jails.
Sure. Haunted prisons seem to have become a popular place for ghost hunting. There are many legends and stories surrounding prisons that are deemed to be haunted around the world. Many of the facilities date back hundreds of years. Haunted prisons have always served as prisons to house those convicted of crimes, while others either prisons and were converted into other types of facilities, or were other facilities and converted into prisons. Regardless of the orientations of these structures, one thing remains true. There that are just like me and you have had experiences there that they cannot be explained based on the laws of reality that we are all familiar with. The phenomenon that occurs in these haunted prisons attracts paranormal investigators on a regular basis. We have a long history of high emotions. Find in these types of facilities are typically facing lengthy sentences. When an individual loses their freedom of movement, their freedom of speech, their freedom to do those things that bring them contentment, well, it does something to them. The world suddenly becomes a dark place. To no hope. There is little to no happiness. There is little to no excitement towards the future. The individual often becomes devastated mentally and emotionally. The world typically becomes a burden in itself. Several people who serve time in prison are literally willing to give up their lives in order to escape the depths of confinement, while others find that even after death, they face an eternity of confinement. Paranormal investigators who specialize in studying the hauntings that seem to plague prisons that were once operational and still in operation believe that the dead are naturally attracted to these locations due to the emotional charge that seems to linger in the air and bounce off the cold, hard walls.
How true that is.
Very much so.
The very first thing that we have is the Essex County Penitentiary hauntings, known as either the Essex County Penitentiary or the Newark Street Jail. And it's the oldest public building in Essex County, New Jersey, and its state of disrepair and neglect stand as testament to the fact. It was built in 1837 on the New Morris Canal to replace an older jail courthouse that burned to the ground 2 years prior. In a cost-cutting move, it was decided that the new jail would stand separate from the courthouse and that it would hold offenders from both the county and the city of Newark. While the original jail was built in a pastoral campus-like setting, with the inmates encouraged to stay active, the Newark Street Jail was a stark box-like structure built for housing, not rehabilitation. It has been a few renovations over the years. In the 1890s, 112 new cells were added to the complex, and the total of cells just before the building was left to right stood at 300. It served as Essex County's main jail until 1970, when a new jail was constructed. It then became home of the Essex County Narcotics Bureau for a short while. After they relocated, the building was abandoned. Essex County Penitentiary was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1991, but no effort has been made to repair or even preserve the property. So far as paranormal activity is concerned, the Essex County Penitentiary is a hotbed of activity as can be expected of a faculty of such an age and purpose. There are uneasy feelings, cold spots, shadow figures, and disembodied footsteps, and such reports are common for those brave enough to explore the derelict structure. Former security guards tell the story of an old man, Brown, who still watches over these cell blocks. It is believed that this is the spirit of a former warden. There are many places where people get the feeling that they are not alone in small spaces, or that they are being watched, and these instances are usually attributed to the ghost of Old Man Brown. Perhaps concurrent with this haunting, people can often hear phantom footsteps close to the old warden's quarters, which was always patrolled regularly by the guards. Perhaps the most flamboyant story about Essex County Penitentiary is that about the inmate in the central hall who managed to commit suicide by lighting himself on fire.
Oh, Jesus.
How the man managed to pull this off is still a mystery, but fire had consumed 90% of his body. There is still a charred mark on the concrete outside the cell in the shape of a man, which is typical in burning deaths. Said to haunt this section of the jail seems to be angry and violent. I would be too if I burnt myself up, as this is where abusive EVPs have been captured and pushes and hair pulling have occurred. Reports of phantom sounds that resemble heavy machinery heard in the area of the prison that served as the workshop. The Essex County Penitentiary has grown since it was featured in a televised investigation. There is ghost hunters, wouldn't you know it? But it is still a very dangerous place to visit because of the disrepair and the fact that as an abandoned structure, it has become a gathering place for vagrants and small-time criminals. Now,
I know what it's like to burn my finger, set myself on fire.
It's become a hangout for small-time criminals. Can you get the irony of that? They're going to hang out in a prison.
Yeah. I'd like to hang out in an abandoned prison.
I wouldn't care if I was a criminal. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near a prison, whether it was abandoned or otherwise.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
No, just saying. Excuse me. Okay.
All right. Eastern State Penitentiary.
I love that.
As being the most expensive building built in the U.S. at the time, the Eastern State Penitentiary became a prototype and designed to 300 prisons. Operated under the Pennsylvania system from 1829 to 1913. By the Quakers, was designed to force the incorrigibles sent there to look inside themselves and find God. The system which placed inmates in complete solitude drove many a sane man to madness. Prisoners at Eastern State had a toilet, table, Bible in their cells, in which they were locked all but 1 hour a day. When the prisoners did leave their cells, a black hood would be placed over their heads so they could not see any prisoners as they were guided through the halls of the prison. Interaction of any form of communication between inmates was forbidden. Wow, I didn't even know that. Inmates lived a life in mundane solitude and would only get a glimpse of sunlight, known as the eye of God, which came through a slit in the prison ceiling. Desperate need of human interaction, prisoners would tap on pipes or whisper through vents to each other. If caught, the penalty was brutal. Now, the harsh punishments, they had the water bath. The rules risked being dunked in a bath of ice-cold water, then hung from a wall for the night. Wow. During the winter months when this punishment was most popular, the water of the inmate's skin would form into layers of ice before morning. They had the mad chair, named such because it was not uncommon for an inmate to go bad before his punishment ended. Inmates would be strapped into the chair with leather strips so tightly that it was impossible for them to make the smallest movements without food until the circulation in their body almost stopped from the tightness of the straps and the lack of movement. They have the iron gag. It was known as the iron gag and specifically designed for those inmates who refused to obey the no communication policy. An iron collar was clamped onto the tongue of the inmate to his wrists, where the straps hide behind their back. Movement resulted in a tearing of the tongue and severe bleeding. For this torture, died from loss of blood before the torment ended.
Yeah.
The hole. Dug under Block 14, the hole was nothing but a pit in the ground where incorrigible inmates would stay locked, sometimes for weeks. There was no light. Those thrown into this torturous grip would receive water and a slice of bread if they got to it before the rats and roaches. It's been reported that the Quakers were not responsible for the punishments the inmates were forced to endure. The extreme penitence was something the higher staff in the prison designed and enforced. Charles Dickens visited the prison in 1840 and found the conditions appalling. He described the inmates at Eastern Penn as being buried alive and wrote about the psychological tortures the inmates suffered at the hands of their captors. Prior to its reform in 1913, the prison was designed to house 250 inmates and had over 1,700 prisoners jammed into tiny makeshift cells where there was little light and even less ventilation. Conditions of the prison unacceptable, the prison was taken over and reformed, and the Pennsylvania system was abolished. Finally, in 1971, the sprawling, monstrous prison was closed. Today, the penitentiary is open to the public. In a typical year, maybe 24 paranormal investigations take place in cell blocks, and according to Assistant Program Director Brett Bernatolino, that almost evidence of activity. Tourists and employees have reported hearing weeping, giggling, whispering coming from inside the prison walls. Harsh prison.
You gotta wonder if they're still trying to talk to each other in regards they're still punishing them for it.
That's crazy.
It is. West Virginia Penitentiary. The West Virginia Penitentiary, Moundsville, and I still want to go there, actually, with its striking stone facade and Gothic castle-like style, opened in 1876. The structure was originally built for 480 prisoners, but by the early 1930s, it housed a total of 2,400 prisoners. At times, these prisoners would be assigned to one of the tiny 5-by-7 cells. In 1929, construction to expand the prison began, but because of the shortage of iron due to the war, it was not completed until 1959. In 1986, the West Virginia Supreme Court ruled these small cells were cruel and unusual punishment and ordered the prison to be closed. In 1995, the last prisoners were transferred out of Moundsville. In the late 1800s, Moundsville took over all executions for the state. In all, 85 men were hung and 9 were electrocuted. These were only a small part of the violent past at Moundsville. Suicide, murder, and violent punishments contributed to the death of hundreds of inmates. Because of poor record keeping, of course, inmates who died violent deaths while incarcerated at Moundsville is unknown. In 1886, prison officials were exposed for hiding whips and other items used to punish incorrigibles from the state inspectors, but after one of the superintendents resigned from the prison, he did a tell-all interview with the Inquirer, exposing the violence and torture on the inmates by prison officials. The following are excerpts from the interview describing the atrocities. And you'd figure, if he thought he could make some money doing that, he would. You know, he's retiring or whatever from the prison, you know.
Yeah.
It is an instrument invented and built in the prison. It is made somewhat in the shape of a quarter circle, with the highest end about 3 or 4 feet above the platform upon which it is set. The prisoner is stripped naked and bent over upon the machine. His feet are fastened to the floor with ropes, while his hands, which are stretched over the upper end, are tied with rope attached to small blocks, by which a tension so strong that the frame of the prisoner can almost be torn in two can be made with a slight pull. After the prisoner is placed in position, the superintendent or whoever does the whipping takes a heavy whip made of sole leather, 2 pieces of which about 3 feet long are sewed together and the ends scraped slightly, rounding, the lash being 3 inches out at the handle, through to a point. With the whip, the prisoner is beaten until he is almost dead, or the strength of the man who is doing the whipping gives out. The shoe fly. That infernal kicking guinea was not the only instrument of torture. There was the shoe fly, an instrument so arranged that the victim could be placed with his feet in stocks, his arms pinned, and his head fastened so that he could not move it. Then someone would take the hose and turn the water full upon the prisoner's face. This was kept up until the victim was partly strangled to death. Imagine a man receiving a stream of water from an full in the face without the power of changing his position. Then think of that stream being ice cold water and you can form an idea. According to popular legend, the prison buildings were built on an old Native American burial ground. There you go. Oh, wow. Some believe that the legend, coupled with its violent past, is why it is haunted. With its violent past, deplorable conditions, and 2 major riots, Mansfield Penitentiary is a popular destination for those who study paranormal activity. Some claim that the prison is plagued with what is called residual haunting, and I'm sure it is, which are defined as a replay of a tragic event from the past. Places like that, I'm sure, has a lot of residual stuff. There are several areas in the prison known as hot spots where an unusual amount of paranormal activity reportedly occurs. Such places include the chapel, shower cage. Why always is it the chapel that's haunted in those places?
I know, right?
Chapel, shower cages, death row, the sugar shacks. I wonder what the heck that is. Recreational area and the North Wagon Gate, which is where death row inmates were taken to be hung before the faculty used the electric chair. One other area known for strange occurrences is the circular entrance gate to separate arriving inmates from the warden's living quarters. According to reports, the circular cage turns periodically by itself, giving the impression that spirits or criminals are still arriving at the prison. And I remember seeing something on there about that turning entrance thing, the circular thing.
What entrance?
When you, I guess when you came in through the main gate, it had like a revolving circular deal that they went in and it would revolve around, you know, and they would come out in whatever area they were going to. And that was so none of them could reach the warden's office or living quarters.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
And also that shadow person.
Yeah.
Why was there an echo? All right. Well, that shadow person that they found, that picture on Moundsville.
Yeah.
I think it was Taps fake. That was all they admitted to the being fake. All right, what do we got here?
Mansfield.
Reformatory. Inspired by old German castles, architect Levi T. Scott designed Mansfield Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio, in 1896, with the hopes that the institution would offer a spiritual uplift to the boys who were sent there for reform. In the mid-1900s, the building standards for Correctional Institute standards by the 1990 Mansfield Reformatory was closed. Since its closure, rumors of spirits of tortured inmates who died in the prison filled the halls with a restless energy, unable to escape the prison's bars. Rumor of guilty guards also contribute to the stories of the haunted facility as they remain trapped in the gruesome nightmare they created for the prisoners locked inside. Employees have reported experiencing strong paranormal events in the administration wing, where Warden Glatke and his wife Helen resided. The story is Helen, while reaching for a box in the closet, knocked a gun off the shelf to the floor, causing a bullet to discharge into her chest. She was rushed to the Mansfield General Hospital, where she died as a result of her injuries. And rampant that Warden Glatke was responsible for Helen's death, but there was never any proof of the substantiate such rumors. Glatke suffered a heart attack and died in the same hospital where Helen died. Some believe that Helen and Warden Glatke haunt the administration rooms to this day. The strong smell of Helen's rose perfume reportedly floats in and out of her pink bathroom. Visitors reporting feeling a gush of cold air pass through them as it is not uncommon to hear of a jammed camera shutter, which unexplainably worked again once the visitors left the area. Now, Ted Glatke, the youngest son of Helen and Warden Glatke, he said that most of the information written about his parents haunting Mansfield Reformatory is based on sensationalism and inaccurate stories. Chapel. The chapel is suspected of many paranormal events, and some believe it is nucleus for much of the prison's haunted tales. Was first an execution room where inmates were tortured and died slow deaths while hanging from the rafters may account for the many reported orbs photographed and the strange recordings some say they have captured in this area of the prison. Have reported seeing spirits lingering near doorways only to vanish once their presence is detected. Reformatory, where many prisoners died miserable deaths, is known in paranormal circles to set off EMF detectors, and claims of clusters of orbs have been captured in photographs. There also has been several reports from visitors that they felt unexplained gushes of air pass by them. The basement. The spirit of a 14-year-old who was beaten to death in the basement is said to linger in the dark, crumbling hallways, which twist around the dark, decaying basement. Also, the spirit of a former reformatory employee named George is said to haunt the basement halls. The reformatory's library and a small inmate's graveyard are believed by some to be haunted. Visitors have reported seeing objects move in the graveyard, and equipment failure is not uncommon in the library. Psychics visiting the library have reported seeing the spirit of a young woman, possibly Helen, or a nurse who was killed by one of the prisoners. Cell blocks. Prisoners told of feeling someone tucking them in at night, and it was rumored that the ghost of Helen or the nurse would move in and out of cells, bringing a touch of comfort to the inmate with a simple tuck of a blanket. The hole. The hole, located in the basement of the prison, was a place where prisoners who broke the rules were kept in one of the 20 cells. Inmates would be kept in the dark, dank, roach-infested cells with one or more inmates with little to eat and no place of comfort of sleep. Bread and water was the common meal, with lunch provided every 3 days. The stronger inmates would take the food from the weaker, leaving many to suffer hunger as well as other hardships. Many prisoners died in the hole, and some believed that their tortured spirits remained, prompting reports of negative paranormal energy in this area. Visitors to this area sometimes leave after being overwhelmed with nausea. Others feel chills run through their bodies. The feeling of being watched permeates in the room, and some have even reported seeing glowing eyes peering at them from dark corners. Today, the reformatory is in the process of being restored. The Mansfield Reformatory organization is working diligently to prevent any future deterioration.
Rhodey speak in the chat room over there and said something about something being fake. What was you talking about, Rhodey?
Something being fake?
Yeah, she said, mentioned your name and said something that you brought
it was
up
Christina
was fake.
She said it was Christina fake. Yeah, no, it really was. They admitted to faking that. So,
and see, that's one of the things is some of the reports you get are fake and just done to make people think that you got all this stuff going on and you really don't.
yeah.
But then again, there should be enough real stuff going on in a place like that. You wouldn't have to fake anything.
Exactly. I mean, it's a TV show on TV. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. But they'll go through there, and the networks will go through there and want to set up fake stuff and everything just to give everybody, to get more ratings, to get like a ooh moment,
Exactly.
And you don't need it.
Yeah, you don't need that.
That's one reason why I would never work for a network like that. The Fisher County Jail. The Fisher County Jail was built in 1892 and was a simple stone structure for the growing town. The building is still functional today, but only houses a small number of inmates, as the whole town only has a population of around 1,000 people. There is an inmate here that does not appear to be human. The ghost has made himself known to inmates through various forms of physical contact. Inmates have reported the spirit touching them, throwing things, flushing toilets, and just making noise. The unknown spooky presence has even been seen by the sheriff. One time the ghost even lit a stove for a jailer. The origin of the spirit is unknown, but it is believed to perhaps be the ghost or ghosts of a sheriff and deputy that were murdered by an inmate in 1927. That's interesting.
Yeah. All right, we have the Old Charleston Jail. The city of Charleston set aside 4 square acres of land for public use. Over the years, it was a hospital, whorehouse, and workhouse for runaway slaves before being turned into a jail in 1802. The original building consisted of 4 stories with 2-story octagonal tower.
Octagonal.
Yeah, there you go, octagonal. I know I was missing a syllable. Robert Mills, America's first native-born architect, designed a fireproof wing with individual cells in 1822, which was replaced in 1855 by a rear there you go. Go ahead, Roger.
Octagonal.
Octagonal wing by Charleston architects Barbett and Seeley. In 1886, earthquake damaged the tower and top story of the main building so severely they had to be removed. The gallows remained in the courtyard until being destroyed by Hurricane Hugo. The jail never received indoor plumbing, electricity, running water, or glass in the windows. The jail remained operational until 1939. During these 137 years, it housed Confederate and federal prisoners of war, including the 54th Massachusetts Regiment upon their capture, and Charleston's most infamous criminals, such as John and Lavinia Fisher, were convicted and executed for robbery and murder for 30 or 300 people. They were imprisoned in the jail from 1819 to 1820, maintaining their innocence until the day they were publicly hanged. They awaited hanging. The last of the 19th century high sea pirates were jailed there in 1822. He plotted a slave revolt in 1822 to take over Charleston. Before the plan could, he was imprisoned and later hanged in the Old Charleston Jail along with over 170 free blacks and slaves and 4 white men for their involvement and support. Vesey plot, increased restrictions were placed on slaves and free blacks, including a law requiring all black seamen to be kept at the jail while they were in port. So saw bootleggers, gangsters, and debtors. The jail remained vacant for 61 years after it closed. The American College of the Building Arts acquired it in 2000 and began the preservation effects. Today, the Old City Jail is an official Save American Treasure of the National Trust for Historic Preservation and the White House Millennium Council. It also hosts the Bulldog Tour's Haunted Jail Tour. So the jail is reportedly haunted by spirits of deceased prisoners that died in jail. One of the spirits is believed to be Lavinia Fisher, who is often seen in the white wedding dress she wore to court. Cell doors move on their own. Shadow people are often seen. Many visitors have been touched, grabbed, and scratched.
Those doors slam shut. Like I said, I'd love to just go to a bunch of those old prisons and jails like that and close down, because with all the way they were treated a lot of the times, and of course the prisoner on prisoner death rate,
Yeah, just like Jen said in chat, jails or mental hospitals always carry negative energy, and that's true. The way they were treated in those insane asylums as well as prisons, both of them.
Now, I'm not sure exactly what this says. Old Seaview Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
The site hides its secrets well. The history is exceptionally hard to dig up. Monastery, once stood at this location in the 19th century. From our best research, this hospital opened its doors in November of 1903 as a tuberculosis sanatorium. In one of the country's most prestigious hospitals, serving over 2,000 patients at a time by the 50s, the hospital was one of the faculty's foremost in eventually finding a cure for this hideous disease. We have been unable. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah,
we have been unable to find an exact date for the closing of the hospital, but it's safe to assume it was sometime in the 70s or 80s, as TV had been controlled by this time. There is still a functioning Seaview Hospital across from this location as well that specializes in rehabilitation. The abandoned location is surrounded by a fence. There are also rumors that we could not substantiate that this location was also used as an insane asylum. Apparitions of former patients and staff feeling of being watched. Apparition of a monk mad and slaughtered his fellow brothers in the monastery. Feeling of being followed. Phantom footsteps. Screams and cries for help. Figures in the empty windows, disembodied voices, light anomalies, and bangs, and other loud, unexplained noises.
Yeah, that could have been my boo-boo. But it just goes to show you that these hospitals, too, as well as jails, they're just loaded with energy.
This wasn't a haunted jail or prison, but it's still interesting, even though it got in the wrong category, I guess, somehow.
Yeah, I had that in the wrong category, so my apologies.
It was still good, though.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
New Mexico State Penitentiary is notorious for its violent history, including the 1980 riot. Due to overcrowding and an abusive staff, the history of this prison is covered with blood and violence. Today you will not see the conditions that led to so much upheaval, but there is a chance some say you could see New Mexico State Penitentiary ghosts. The prison was first opened in 1885 after construction was completed. The penitentiary was based on the same blueprints used for other prisons, such as Sing Sing. 3. New Mexico became the first of the western states to employ prisoners in highway construction. By 1922, the prison was overcrowded. The convicts beginning due to the poor food and excessive force by the correctional officers. When they refused to go back to their cells, the guards opened fire. Riot, 1 inmate was dead and 5 others were injured. In the following investigation, the officers and guards were blamed for the riot due to lack of experience. Now, this would be the very last thing of rioting. In fact, it would only get worse. In July of 1922, the prisoners rioted again. They claimed that they were tired of the excessive force used by the correctional officers and decided to hold Deputy Tahash and several guards hostage. In the resulting fight, 2 inmates ended up dead and many others were wounded. This riot ended to the abandoning of the original building. A new facility was constructed in 1956. It would be called the main unit of the prison. Unfortunately, there would be yet another riot in the main unit. This would become one of the deadliest and worst prison riots in the United States. In 1980, the inmates rioted over a 2-day period. 12 hostages were held hostage by some prisoners who managed to escape from their cell blocks. By the time the rioting was over, some 33 inmates were killed. Some of the inmates' deaths were rather violent as they involved a blowtorch.
Dang.
The unit would reopen for another 18 years before it finally closed. It was shut down for good in 1998. Today it is referred to as the Old Pen. It has remained empty since, except for the occasional New Mexico State Police and National Guard training. It was also the location for the remake of the film The Longest Yard. Since it has such a violent past, it's no surprise that the prison is allegedly haunted now. Some of the paranormal activity claimed is an apparition of a man in green convict apparel walking through the hallways, icy cold spots at random places throughout the prison, loud and disembodied voices, and cell doors opening and closing on their own.
It's just, it's crazy some of the activity in these places, but when you think about the riots and like I said before, you got riots and guards fighting and inmates and guards dying in riots. You got gang violence where one gang, will send somebody to kill somebody in another gang and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, prisons are pretty bad.
You can just imagine, how much activity was going to be in a place like that.
Some of the prisons, the prisoners actually take charge in some prisons. That the guards won't even go in there. You know what I mean? It's like, right. That's crazy.
This one is called the Cornwall Jail in Canada. Much like the prisons here, those in Canada were built to last, and many are still standing. Get back to the 1800s, are being shut down for new and improved faculties. In Ontario, housed its last official prisoner in 2002. During the War of 1812, the original courthouse was used as barracks, and courts were held in St. John Church and local taverns. 14 years it burned down, and another move took place until new plans were drawn up. The new jailhouse was completed in 1834 and saw its share of well-known prisoners such as Roger Corrin, one of the boxing Hilton brothers, and a few Hell's Angels. Cornwall was meant to only house 50 to 60 prisoners at a time, but known to sometimes contain more than 100. Only 3 guards were on duty at a time, which meant activities such as exercise in the courtyard happened because the inmates could not be controlled. Happened or could not happen, or did not happen, probably more like it. This may or may not have led to some of the suicides in Cornwall. 10 inmates were hung in what used to be the gallows before executions in the courtyard ended in 1954. Many were buried in that courtyard. The jailhouse received many new additions over the years. When a new section was added in the 1960s, it uncovered 3 cells laid flat in the ground. These coffin-like holding areas were used as a form of punishment. There is no record of their existence. Cornwall Jail reopened in 2005 as Ontario's newest tourist attraction. Do visitors come to see how prisoners once lived inside its walls, or do they want to experience its haunted side? With so many deaths in its 175-year history, some would think it's stranger not to think a spirit or two roam the hallways. Some have reported hearing distinctive sounds such as a trolley going down the hallway. Cell doors that were closed the night before are found open the next day. Orbs have been captured in photos and on film, blah, blah, blah. A male voice has been heard humming by staff. Shadows have also been seen, and some believe a female and child spirits still reside in the jailhouse. We will see on Wednesday if any of these claims can be violated. I don't know who we are, but must be ghost hunters. Jason and Grant's investigation results are earned.
That's ghost hunters. But you blah, 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 Roger. That's because the orbs, huh? I know how you feel about orbs. And I was like, oh, I got it.
You got me.
I got that. All right, the haunted Carrollton Jail. What once was the separate community of Carrollton, the seat of, or is it Carrollton? Carrollton, the seat of Jefferson Parish, now sits in the uptown historic district of New Orleans, Louisiana. Others remember the old jail in Carrollton that sat behind the courthouse. It was once located nearby where the historic streetcars still run today. Civil War, this jail housed a vicious criminal accused of murdering his wife. The police officers at the station, enraged by this crime, took matters into their own hands. They beat this man to death in his cell. It was stated with his dying breath he promised he would return from the grave, presumably to take revenge. Reports from this police station in 1899 reflect that this wife killer did return to haunt the jail. His violent presence was noted near the cell wall where he was beaten to death. An unseen force suddenly tossed a woman who was standing against this wall away from it. Bravely, she retook her spot 3 more times. Each of these times, as she leaned against the wall, she was mysteriously thrown off. Now that is a lot of energy to do that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it takes a lot of energy to do that. But later in the same week, a police officer lying on a couch near this wall was tossed away from it along with the couch. Yet another officer experienced the same phenomenon. Rumors began to spread about these odd incidences. Other strange incidences involving the wall began to occur. A portrait of Admiral Dewey was seen spinning, and a painting of General P.T. Beauregard of Shiloh fame dropped and broke. Shiloh? Yeah, dropped and broke as it hit the floor. Both items were securely attached to this wall at the time of these incidences. The Carrollton Jail now was believed to be haunted. Prisoners kept at the jail stated they were beaten in their cells by an unseen entity. Officers heard mysterious footsteps, and others saw paperweights fly from their desks into the air. One officer even claimed this angry ghost tried to strangle him. Yet another ghost was seen at the jail. This apparition was that of a deceased police officer who had worked at the station. His appearance ended as abruptly as they began. The jail was torn down in the 1930s. The wrecking crew stated they saw a vague figure watching them as they worked. They heard this figure laughing. Despite the fact this jail has been gone a long time, there are still reports that this ghost is seen near the old courthouse and streetcar line. Crazy.
The old city jail, there's a bunch of those, I'm sure. There are a number of haunted places in South Carolina. Okay, so I know where it's at now. And the Old City Jail is one of them. The Old City Jail is located in Charleston, South Carolina, constructed as early as 1738. Dang, that is old. It originated as an area where slaves served and individuals who were homeless could receive minimal medical care. In addition to this, several notorious criminals of the time were housed at the faculty and severely punished for their crimes that they had committed. In the year of 1790, this structure served as a jail for offenders as well as an asylum for the mentally challenged. There are several haunting tales of the Old City Jail. Now, that's a hell of a combination, I gotta say. You know, you're gonna put hardened criminals and freaking lunatics in the same place.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah. I mean, I can see the convicts going, hey, Joe, come let us out of here. They locked the door by mistake. You know, can you let us out?
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and these people not being of the right mind wouldn't know any different. Just saying. Anyway.
That's amazing.
Okay. When you consider the age of the structure coupled with punishments and the individuals who have stayed at this structure throughout time, that there is such a rich history of unexplained phenomenon and real ghost stories. The following represents some of the stories that have been told regarding the spirits that seem to roam around one of the most haunted places in South Carolina. Throughout history, many individuals have claimed that they have seen the apparition of an African-American male wandering aimlessly throughout the various halls that are within the building. This gentleman seems to be well warned by the appearance of the ragged clothing that he is seen wearing. He seems to walk slowly as if he is very tired. It is believed that this is the spirit of a slave that once served on the property, considering the attire he is wearing. It is also believed that the spirit is more of a residual haunting rather than an intelligent haunting, as he does not seem to be aware of the living or his surroundings. Individuals who work in the faculty as tour guides and those that have visited the haunted prison to have a look around and learn about the history of the building have experienced numerous things that are completely unexplained. For many, the experiences have been physical. These individuals have been grabbed, pushed, and touched in a numerous number of ways that do not seem pleasant or friendly at all. In addition to this, many have felt as if they were being watched, and some have complained of odors that make them actually feel quite ill. Documented cases of having shortness of breath and individuals feeling as if they are being choked have also been experienced by a number of employees and tourists to the location. Well, I mean, if shortness of breath is a thing, I don't need to go there.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
And that's all intelligent hauntings for them to touch, right?
Yeah. Well, intelligent hauntings is any kind of haunting where a spirit will interact with you, whether it be verbally, physically. You know, if you walk by and they turn and look directly at you.
That's intelligent. Because they notice you.
Yeah, because they notice you.
Seeing a ghost and he just looks at you and you're just like, oh, man. I don't know.
Residual will not notice you. They won't interact with you. They'll walk right by or through you if you're in their way, because they're just doing what they're, the same thing over and over.
And poltergeist is just like intelligent.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Actually, poltergeist, Some believe they're spirits, some believe they're the pin-up emotions of adolescent living people who pin up energy and everything, and they release it through their subconscious or whatever.
Ah, gotcha.
You know, so a lot of that's why I like poltergeist stories, because you really don't know which one it is. You know, I mean, and it's been proved that when you remove a certain person from the location, the activity stops.
Yeah. And don't they say it's usually teenagers?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Usually,
you know what I mean?
Usually going through the puberty stage. And
yeah, I was going to say puberty. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just some of the things that are said. You know, there's other parts to it. But anyway.
Okay.
We
have Frontier Prison. The haunted Frontier Prison in Rawlings, Wyoming, is considered to be one of the haunted prisons in the United States that draws the most attention from paranormal researchers, ghost hunters, and everyday people who are seeking a little adventure. This prison also goes by the name of the Old Pen. It is believed that the prison was first put in use around the beginning of the 1900s. In the early part of the 1980s, the prison was officially closed and would not be used again for the purpose and intent of housing convicted criminals. Here, you will catch a glimpse of the Haunted Frontier Prison. Okay, so the current state of this prison is that it is a famous tourist attraction. That the structure offers, it is rather appealing to many individuals. This is especially true of those individuals who elect to conduct paranormal research and or ghost hunting activities. You see, the Frontier Prison is said to be a haunted prison. This draws the attention of those who seek to find life's answers through the door of death. This is why many elect at this prison for Halloween and fall festivities, as well as touring for ghosts. The following details are some of the haunts that have been associated with the Frontier Prison. So we have many individuals who serve as employees to this particular museum have stated that they have seen apparitions firsthand in various locations in the structure. It is not known what type of hauntings they are. Some of the witnesses have said that the spirit does not seem to be aware of their presence, which indicates a potential residual haunting. Then there are report cases in which the spirit was aware of them and attempted to interact with them. If this is the case, it would indicate that these are intelligent hauntings. Seeing that there seems to be no mischief or major problems, these spirits do not seem to fit the description of a demonic haunting or a poltergeist. Many visitors and employees alike have stated that certain areas of the Frontier Prison seem to be relatively intense emotionally. When they stumble upon these areas, it feels like it was a hostile environment and they experience an immense fear. Lastly, there are several areas of the Frontier Prison that seem to have a lot of paranormal activity, like sounds and voices, sometimes even gruesome wails. These areas include that of the showers, the area where prisoners were once held, various cells, and death row.
For those who don't know, this Frontier Prison is in Rawlings, Wyoming. In case you want to go check it out yourself. Payback Island. You gotta love a name like that. Fort Delaware is located on Payback Island in Delaware and is considered to be a haunted prison. This particular structure is built in a pentagonal manner and reflects that of a military structure. It comes complete with a mysterious dungeon and fits the overall look and feel of a haunted prison. Today, this particular building has undergone restorations, and if I might add, restorations and revamping an old place usually stirs up some kind of activity. So if they did some restoring stuff there, I'm sure they stir up things.
Yes.
Anyway, undergone restorations and is open to the public. However, during the time of the Civil War, this was a hot spot for Confederate prisoners. During the time of the First and Second World Wars, Fort Delaware was used in an effort to defense on the coast. It was 1951 that it was named as a state park and gained public access. Throughout history, this prison has made paranormal experiences for a large number of individuals. It is believed that the spirits that haunt Fort Delaware are a direct result of misery and violence. Here, naturally, many spirits appear to be restless, and some may even be tortured due to the deaths and other experiences that they endured during their life. Listed below are some of the many experiences that have been presented to the living from beyond the grave. 1985, an individual was touring Fort Delaware and taking a variety of pictures throughout the inside of the structure. Once this individual developed their film, they were quite surprised to see they had caught an apparition on film. This was of a soldier dressed in a Confederate-type clothing. The apparition was not solid, but clear enough that the details behind him were clearly apparent. He was photographed standing in the archway of a door as if debating whether crossing to the other side or remaining. Area of this prison where the dungeon stands, many visitors and employees have heard frightening sounds, that of someone attempting to break loose from chains. It has also been noted that moaning and screams have emerged from this area. Believe it or not, the apparitions of pirates have been viewed in and around Fort Delaware. It is believed that when pirates were caught in the early days of the life of the structure, they were housed in this prison. They always had a desire to be free and revisit the ocean, but it seems as if they never were, and that their spirits remain on the grounds and in the building of this haunted prison. The unusual occurred among the many floors of Fort Delaware. Many have recorded cases of the sound of walking, while others have reported violent screams and pleas for help. This haunted prison not only housed the prisoners in life, but it seems to house them in spirit to this day. That's on my bucket list I'd like to go to. Okay.
Crown Point Sheriff's House. In 1882, the Sheriff's House was built to serve a succession of elected sheriffs for 76 years until 1958. It is a two-story brick building designed in the Second Empire Victorian style, complete with deeply sloping mansard roofs. Thanks to the effort of the Sheriff's House Foundation of Indiana, the building is currently being refurbished and renovated. West Indiana Building and Construction Trades Council have been generous in this effort by donating workers and materials for needed plastering, carpentry, electrical, roofing, and other areas needing a facelift. The large two-story brick jail with its own tall chimney, you need a chimney in a jail, is located in the back of the building. It isn't a very good shape inside, but it too is having work done so it can be used as storage, but still won't be part of the tour for the public. Indiana, 1926, a large two-story brick jail building was added onto the sheriff's house, making it more convenient to keep an eye on people in custody, bringing work home from the office, so to speak. Thus, the back part of the sheriff's house was called the Lake County Jail. County Jail became known as the place from which John Dillinger made his fantastic escape in 1934. After John Dillinger was caught by authorities in Tucson, Arizona on January 30th, 1934, Lake County was first in line to drag him into court for a trial because he was involved in a bank robbery where innocent people were killed. Bank robber gangster John Dillinger knew he was headed for death if he remained in the hands of the state. While in custody in this jail, he used the materials at the hand to help him temporarily foil the wheels of justice. Using jail blades, John carved a gun from a wooden washboard, staining it with black shoe polish, and then he threatened the guards with the fake gun, helped himself to, took hostages temporarily to ensure his escape to Illinois. For nothing, as it didn't get him very far. The following Sunday, after his bold escape, John Dillinger was killed by federal officers outside the Biograph Theater in Chicago. The jail was closed in 1970. An entity or two is stuck. Perhaps a prisoner is still being held there, though in reality was freed long ago from this period of time of being in custody in this jail. Reports from the living and photos taken of a jail window and inside the building point to this, or perhaps the entity is of a guard or a law officer who was fooled by Dillinger's fake gun. Cell doors have the habit of opening and closing by themselves. Some unseen entities seem to be trying the bars of cells, looking for a loose one because the living have heard the bars rattling in cells with no living person in sight. Is the case in other haunted places, the unseen entity is fascinated with electricity and likes to turn the lights on and off. Voices and footsteps have been heard in here where no one living is anywhere near the jail area. So that's pretty interesting.
I'm sorry, my page just went berserk on me now. I don't know where I'm at.
We're starting at the Old Newgate Prison.
Okay, right there. Right, I was right there when you said that. Old Newgate Prison originally began as a copper mine in the 1700s. In 1773, it was converted into a prison to house serious criminals. The first prisoner, John Henson, was committed for burglary in 1773. Later, Tories and Loyalists were held here during the Revolutionary War. It was the first state prison in America. Newgate ceased operating as a prison in 1827 as a mine at that time. In 1976, Newgate Prison was declared a National Historic Landmark. The prison is one of the leading tourist attractions in Connecticut. Newgate is now owned and administered by the state of Connecticut. It has certainly seen its fair share of deaths when it was operating as a mine. It is reported, to say the least. Many miners died within the tunnels from falls and being crushed. Also, there were many deaths when it was used as a prison. Guards killed inmates and inmates killed the guards. Reports of hauntings here include screams coming from the empty areas of the mine, a ghostly face within one of the rooms, and an apparition of a man who appears to be climbing a rope above a shaft as if he were trying to escape. Other stories include unexplainable cold spots, being touched when no one is there, and the feeling of being watched when in empty areas. There is a story by a visitor to the prison who explains how he went into the mine and was shown around by a tour guide dressed in prison clothes. When he left the mine, he thanked one of the other employees for the tour, only to be told that they didn't have anyone working as a tour guide within the mine. Could this have been the spirit of a past prisoner? By all means, it could.
Just to be able to see an apparition that's so solid you think it's alive, to find out it was not. That's just amazing.
Somebody taking you on a tour and everything, and you think they're a living being,
That's amazing to me. I've never seen one. I'd like to see one. like they say, we're always,
It's
angels in our lives.
It's interesting when you have a place that was a prison, a mine, something else. It actually there was a house that got tore down over in the town over from me that I always wanted to go in and I never got to. They tore it down, but it was a funeral home, a restaurant. People actually lived in it as a house. All these things, and I wanted so bad to get in that place, and then they dozed it down, tore it down. And it was
even on land. Just because it tore it down,
it was a Victorian style house too. It was awesome. I don't know why they did that. It was stupid. But they did. Anyway.
Where was this?
It was in Dresden, Tennessee. I used to go by there all the time, and I thought, man, I'm gonna find out who owns that, and I'm gonna see if I can go in there. And I never did. I kept putting it off. And then one day I was driving up through there, and it was gone. I'm like, are you kidding?
Yeah. I hear that.
And I'd heard stories that actually a police officer went in there and said that the place was haunted.
Really?
Yeah. So, snooze you lose, as they say.
I guess. Snooze you lose.
I snoozed one too many times.
I know, right? All right, we have Sambucas Island Prison. It seems the Ghost Hunters International team has been fascinated in investigating the penal system around the world. Their next stop is San Lucas Island in Costa Rica. This island's history horror began in the 16th century. The Spanish Inquisitor, right?
Huh?
Inquisitor Gonzalo Fernandez Oviedo used San Lucas as a concentration camp for local Chara people. These people were slaughtered on the site of their sacred burial grounds. A few hundred years later, San Lucas was turned into a penal island. The prison was constructed in 1873, and dictator Thomas Miguel Guardia was dubbed the Caribbean Alcatraz. However, San Lucas also didn't achieve the inescapable label so many prisons sought. There were many daring escapes to shock-infested waters and tragic failures, but then again, who wouldn't want to attempt freedom from one of the most heinous prisons known to man? Only the worst criminals in Costa Rica were sent to San Lucas. The prison was considered the largest in the country's history. The former buildings included a historic dock that is still in use after the first dock was destroyed, a Catholic church, a medical building, temporary holding cells, a 3-story main office, a large concrete disc used to hold water tank, and water pumps. There are also several water pumps in a cemetery under the island. Yeah. There are prison cells of varying security levels containing the typical graffiti such as religious phrases, pornographic images, signatures, and drawings. The above statement is written on one of these cells. The death penalty was abolished by Guatir a year after the prison opened its doors. However, with such prison conditions, a stint in St. Lucas was a death sentence in itself. 60 to 100 inmates occupied one cell at a time. Cells contained low ceilings, few windows, and iron beds with thin mattresses. Beds slept on the floor. Each prisoner was issued a ball and chain. The weight of the ball was determined by how dangerous the inmate was deemed to be. Wow. Favored in the... Can you imagine that? Someone's got a little ball, someone's got this big, huge ball.
Well,
inmates favored. Yeah.
I'd have a marble on mine.
A marble?
Or ball bearing, Small ball bearing.
That's funny. A small ball bearing. Oh.
Yeah.
Inmates labored in the tropical sun, breaking rocks and harvesting salt from the seas. The disc sits in the center of the prison courtyard. In the middle is a hole half filled with water. This was considered solitary confinement. Some inmates spent months in there with only 50 minutes above ground each day. A former inmate, Jose Leon Sanchez, wrote a fictional account of his incarceration at St. Lucas titled La Hombres Solos, or the Lonely Men's Island. The prison remained operational until 1991. The island has since been turned into a wildlife preserve, and St. Lucas is now opened as a tourist attraction. Many believe the former inhabitants of this maximum security facility are still roaming the property.
Well, and I think I'd read some stuff about that place. It really was bad. It was on an island, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was. They said it was really bad, and of course on the island there wasn't nobody overseeing the ones that were overseeing the prisoners.
Yeah.
So they got by with punishing them in whichever manner they saw fit.
Yeah.
Okay. Holmesburg. I did a video on this one. 1896 until 1995, the Holmesburg prison in Pennsylvania used much of the history at Holmesburg has instances of rioting, murder, rape, and even medical experimentation. Yeah, I did do a video on this. Medical experimentation. Most prisons claim violence. Huh?
At the prison, there was a.
They experimented on the prisoners for drug companies and stuff.
That's amazing.
Barbaric. Maybe the strong negative energy is what keeps the ghost of Holmesburg prison so active. There was a hunger strike held in 1938. As a disciplinary action, guards took the 25 leaders of the hunger strike to a section in the prison called the Bake Ovens on Klondike. In mid-August, the heat reached 190 degrees. The doors opened after 2.5 days, and 4 inmates had, according to the coroner's own words, roasted to death. After an investigation, the courts tried 10 officers and guards. Only 2 got convictions and given sentences of just 1 to 3 years. In 1952, an inmate named Thomas Donato was found dead in a bathtub. Officially, reports were that he drowned, but an autopsy report later showed he was actually beaten to death. In 1970, 250 inmates armed with knives and meat cleavers took over part of the prison after attacking the other inmates and guards. It took a 400-man team to restore order and resulted in the hospitalization of 69 inmates and 27 guards. In 1973, Warden Patrick Curran and his deputy Robert Brumholm met with 2 inmates who proceeded to stab them both to death with prison chives, whatever they call those. Basically homemade knives, to speak kind of.
Yeah, shanks.
Yeah. In 1989, a riot broke out that produced injuries to 54 guards and 94 inmates. Prisoners claimed that the guards repeatedly beat them in retaliation for the riot. There were many claims of abuse and corruption among the officials and guards. In 1951, Dr. Albert M. Kligman, they talk about the experiment.
Okay.
Kligman, a University of Pennsylvania dermatologist, inventor of Retin A, came to Holmesburg. He got called in to take a look at an outbreak of athlete's foot and turned it into a 20-year dermatology test with inmates as lab rats. Dr. Kligman carried out tests involving toothpaste, deodorant, shampoo, skin creams, detergents, liquid dyes, eye drops, foot powders, and hair dye. As a result, the prisoners had to endure frequent painful procedures as constant biopsies to check progress. Kligman used inmates in the early testing of retin A as well. The U.S. Army paid Kligman, get this now, the U.S. Army paid Kligman in 1967 to apply chemicals that caused the skin to blister to the faces and backs of inmates. Kligman said it was to learn how the skin protects itself against chronic assault from toxic chemicals.
Wow.
So-called hardening process. It seems the ghosts of Holmesburg prison are still living in the nightmares of the past. Neighbors have reported hearing loud screams and coming from behind the large stone wall surrounding the prison. Also, they claim to hear sounds of gunfire, rioting, and guards still standing guard in the towers on top of the wall. Now, just to make a point before we get to the end of this one, these inmates were paid just enough to buy a pack of cigarettes or something like that, which back then smoking was still allowed. And that's what they got paid for the torture that was done to them.
Yeah, but no one should be tortured like that. Rather, I mean, well, I guess it's got to fit the crime. Right?
And see, some of them may not have even agreed to do it. They might have been forced to do it, but since they were forced to do it, they took the money to buy their cigarettes with anyway.
Yeah.
But that's horrible.
That is horrible.
How can they let somebody come in there and do stuff like that? It would have been one thing if the prisoners were being punished and they let him do that as a way of punishing them. But no, they were volunteers and freaking probably being made to do it for whatever reason, hand chosen or something,
Yeah.
So no, that was not right at all. Okay, most who came to Holmesburg prison get the feeling of a heavy energy throughout the prison. It is not uncommon to hear doors slamming and hear audible voices echoing through the halls. Claims of electric devices malfunctioning and batteries draining are also a common occurrence. There are claims by guards of seeing full figure apparitions in the prison even before it closed its doors. I wonder why. And even on the hottest days of summer, parts of the prison stay so cold it would make you shiver. After it closed, Holmesburg was the scene for the 1995 film Condition Red, the 1996 movie Up Close and Personal, the 2000 motion picture Animal Factory, and the 2009 film Law Abiding Citizen.
All right. Well, we have a couple more for you guys tonight. Yuma Territorial Prison. The Yuma Prison in Arizona is said to be one of the most haunted structures in the area of Yuma, Arizona. On the first day of July in the year 1876, a group of 7 people entered this prison for the very first time. Very unusual turn of events, these individuals were actually locked into cells that they had constructed with their own hands. Marched into a newly constructed prison with a high level of discomfort, sound, and unless they were released, there were no means of escape. There are several stories of hauntings that seem to be related to the prisoners housed at the structure. Are the spirits of the souls that were locked at the Yuma prison in Arizona still trapped? Well, the Yuma prison had held prisoners for over 3 decades. As a matter of fact, the structure served in a prison for a total of 33 years. At that time, thousands of individuals were incarcerated and ordered to stay within the confines of the prison walls. According to the documentation housing records regarding the prisoners, a total of 3,069 individuals served time here. Out of this grand total of individuals, documentation proves that there were at least 29 different women that reside within the user for an extended amount of time. These individuals committed a variety of crimes for those who had committed murder or attempted it to be ordered to stay. Grand larceny, even crimes such as that of having more than one wife was punishable by a stay at Yuma. Procedures at the time in which this prison was in full operation, the individuals who were punished to spend time within the walls of the immense structure were treated in a way that was considered to be appropriate. In today's criminal justice system, many of the techniques used to punish would be considered to be inhumane. For example, when an individual disobeyed the rules, they would be placed in a dark cell, a form of severe isolation for extended amounts of time. In addition to this, a large ball that restricted the prisoner's movements would be strapped onto them by the way of a chain if they attempted escape. While there were opportunities for these prisoners to excel, they were mostly short-lived opportunities for many. For example, for many given lessons to communicate by way of writing, and other courses were given in reading. There was a library and instructors on the premises to assist in these endeavors. In addition to this, there was an on-site medical facility that assisted the sick and injured. Unfortunately, things got out of hand. Several prisoners were sent to the prison to serve out their time. As a result, it became too crowded. A severe case of tuberculosis also broke out. Prisoners, right at about 119, died at Yuma Prison. It is believed most of the spirits from these individuals still walk the corridors of the prison, bound here for all eternity. Their hauntings to be strongest in the area of the dark cell. While there is no documentation proving that there were any deaths that occurred in the cell, paranormal researchers believe that the spirits in the structure are drawn to it because of the emotional charge that the room has. It is almost energy from the room powers the spirits. There are several other hauntings that are said to occur at the prison as well.
All this stuff is just, like, wow, how did people deal with, how did they survive?
Absolutely.
Whitley County Jail. The Whitley County Jail was built in the heart of farm country, where morals were high and tolerance was low. The first and only execution in Whitley County was soon to happen here, and the word spread of the hanging of Charles Butler. He was a vile bastard, known for his drinking and his temper, and brawling with weaker souls. On a dark and unusually angry evening, Butler, in a drunken stupor, began waving his pistol around and calling for his son. When his wife Abby grabbed the child and ran for the door, Butler was thrown to beating both her and the child, and she would have no more. The boy got through the door, but Abby took a shot in the back. The force of the impact sent her to the edge of the porch, paralyzed. She would die 3 days later. Charles Butler was picked up and brought to our jail, where he claimed he would forever escape and return to haunt the lives of whoever entered his domain. In fact, he did escape to Ohio, where the good Sheriff Frank P. Alwayne did track the notorious Butler, only to literally trip over the villain's drunken body as he lay passed out on a set of railroad tracks. Tuesday, June 10th, 1884, Charles Butler, the murderer, stood on the gallows, not a remorseful bone in his body, save for being caught. The monster stood, hands tied neatly behind his back, the hood over his head, and the noose was placed around his neck. From out in the crowd, a gentleman began asking the guards too many questions, and they disregarded him quite severely. The gentleman seemed relentless, though as if he were not used to being ignored. The guards then began to beat him, and the heat of the day seemed to take its toll on the older gentleman, and he began to lose the fight and fell unconscious. He was thrown in the jail, and the execution resumed. Okay. Butler stepped over the trap door that would bring his death, but he was determined not to go easy. He stood as far back as possible, almost on the hinge of the door. The moment came, and the door was dropped, but Butler, instead of falling quick to snap the neck, slid downward without the force necessary, and slowly began to strangle to death. A fitting end, some would say. Charles Butler would struggle for exactly 10 minutes, gasping and gagging, and emitting the most foul and guttural noises imaginable until there was no more sound or movement. The crowd was aghast and would never again allow an execution for the sheer horror of what they witnessed. The body was brought inside the jail and laid on a gurney on the first room in the west wing. The doctors were shocked to find that he still had a pulse. Oh, excuse me, no. He still had a pulse, however, and it took yet another 3 minutes for that pulse to stop, thus taking a total of 13 minutes to completely die. The jail would now harbor the malicious entity known as the ghost of Charles Butler. But the townsfolk did not know the true horror that was yet to be unleashed upon Whitley County, for deep in the bowels of the dungeon was chained a being that was gaining power as the sun fell. And as his power grew, so did his anger, and he wore with it all his might that he would take revenge on the cattle who had imprisoned him, and the townsfolk who had only watched him being beaten. There was an ancient saying that revenge was a dish best served cold. The jail was a cold place indeed. His name was Deamos Nosferatu, the king of the clan of La Masar de la Noe, and the apocalypse would begin with the first scream. I'm not sure I understand that, but Nosferatu. I thought that was the vampire dude.
Yeah, that's what. How do you pronounce that anyway?
I'm pronouncing it the way it looks, Nosferatu.
Yeah, isn't that the Salem's Lot guy?
Wasn't that the vampire dude?
Yeah. I don't know how to pronounce that.
And they said that he really was a vampire.
Yeah.
No, he had the long claws and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all we have for you tonight, folks. Hope you enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
As much as we did. Very interesting stuff. And as always, we appreciate all of you in the chat room. Thanks for coming. Hope to see you again on the 28th. And, of course, at that time, before that time, that is, we'll let you know. We will inform you what kind of concoction we have for you. Ain't no telling what we'll talk about.
I know, right?
But I promise you it'll be interesting, and I'm trying to see what they're saying over here. Great show. Thanks a lot. Oh, Mary's so sweet. And Rhodey is cool, too. I love Rhodey. Rhodey, who sounds like Cody, we love you.
Yeah, we were just talking to Chad about getting you guys to come down to Salem and do an investigation with our team. I think that would be awesome.
That'd be crazy. I'd love that.
That would. It'd be a nice road trip. I'd like to come up there or something, you know. I'd love to do something with you, Roger.
Oh, yeah. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
And I'd love to check
I'll see what I can...
tunnels up there, too.
Absolutely.
Anyway, like I said, we will announce something between within the next 2 or 3 days, we'll have something up. So look forward to that. We look forward to seeing y'all again. Everybody that's watching and not chatting, we appreciate you. Always fun. Christina, I appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate you too. Absolutely. And have a good night, everybody.
You guys have a good night. We'll catch you next time.
See you next time.
The Paranormal Graveyard.